Okay, great.
All right. So, Carol, who are you? Can you tell me just your first introduction to horses and why that was something you latched onto so passionately?
Gosh. So, both my parents were passionate about all animals, but they both rode, not competitively or anything, and always wanted all of my sisters and I to have horses in our lives. So, from a very young age, we all rode and had horses. Um, it wasn't probably until I was 10 or 11 that I really thought about competing. Um, Before then, it was just the love of horses, riding. I was one of those kids who would chew through concrete to be near a horse.
Yeah.
And I think that's something maybe you're born with. You'll clean 100 stalls just to be able to brush somebody else's horse, even though you've already brushed yours to within an inch of his life.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be in the
So,
genes.
yeah, something.
There's
And
something I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either, but
Okay.
once you have it, it's there for life.
Yes, I would agree. It's very hard to suffocate. It's kind of like you're
Excuse
self-suffocating.
me.
So can you
Yeah.
tell me who your first trainer or help or influence was?
Yes. When I was 10, I had a teacher, pardon me, who was a great old gentleman, one of the last of the great old gentlemen. He had trained with Nuno Oliveira and Ben Scheich, and he was just the epitome of elegance and graciousness, I guess. He was respectful of everybody, very respectful of the animals, all the animals. And so he gave me this image of what being a true horseman was about. I was 10, he was probably in his late 60s, and he talked straight across to me. He never talked down to me. And he came into the position of teaching me really haphazardly because we kept our horses at the same stable where he kept his. And I used to just watch him. And I was amazed at how beautiful and elegant he sat, and he almost never moved. And his horses were beautiful and they could do amazing things. And so I would watch him from around the corner of the barn because I was afraid of him, not because he was mean, but because he was so grand. And one day I was out in the field riding my horse, imagining what it would feel like to sit the way he sits and to be able to just breathe the work into the horses. And he rode up next to me. And I was so afraid to even turn my head and look at him. And he just rode next to me. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then all of a sudden he said something, and I can't even remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, if you turn your hand just slightly like this, you'll be able to communicate with him a little bit better. And from that point on, he became my teacher. And we would ride together out in the fields. He'd give me lessons. He never charged me a penny for anything. It was just that I think he recognized a similar passion in me that he had. And I was too young to understand 99% of what he was guiding me to do and to understand the lineage of education from which he came. Van Schaik, Nuno Oliveira, all these great, great masters. And, but it didn't matter because I just loved learning. Then we moved to Europe and he took care of my horse. And the years that we lived there, he cared for my horse. And then I took lessons from him again when we moved back. And the last thing he ever said to me was, if you never remember anything I've ever taught you, remember this, that a horse without a rider will always be a horse, But a rider without a horse is just a person like any other person. So ride your horse to glorify him and diminish yourself. Be like the wind in the grass. You can't see the wind, but you can see its effect. And so that has informed my riding and the way I approach everything with the horses from that moment on. And yeah, I mean, what an amazing gift to have somebody like that in your life at a very early age, to give you to set the bar high.
Yeah.
As a human being, as well as a rider, and eventually trainer, and eventually a teacher,
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a huge influence. I've been so lucky to have very special people who had an impact on my riding. I've ridden with, taken lessons from, had clinics from a lot of people who I would never ride with again. But I've also had those mentors who gave my riding a quantum leap, if you will.
Yeah.
And my understanding and my appreciation for how hard it is for a horse to carry us around, basically, So this man's name was Colonel Andrew D. Pickard. He was involved in the early creation of the modern pentathlon. And if you're thinking, well, he's got to be too old, look at me, I'm old. I'm really old. Okay, so a lot of the people that influenced my life are no longer living.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to know them when they were living. And a lot of them, the names might not be familiar to the generation that's out there today.
Yeah.
Some will, some iconic names like Nuno Oliveira and Van Schaik, obviously. Jack Legoff, hopefully, because he was the coach of the U.S. 3-day team for so many years and really brought the U.S. 3-day team into the 20th century and into, obviously, Jack Legoff was a rider from the Cadre Noir in France, and he taught in the French tradition, as did my first teacher, Colonel Pickard. So I had Jack Legoff, Jimmy Wofford, Bruce Davidson, B. and Derek DeGrazia. They were all from the lineage of Jack Legoff. Okay. And that was the French tradition. And then when I moved back to Europe and I studied with Christopher Bartle, he also was from the Cadre Noir. And at Saumur, he was also the French tradition. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lineage of French classical riding. I rode with Jean Paillard, who wrote the book Understanding Equitation, and Jean-Claude Rassenet, and Colonel Card. And then the latest, of course, was Philippe Carl. Okay. So that's...
Okay. Can you just kind of go over a little bit of what you did competitively, that, I mean, I know you're so accomplished, and just with the different disciplines. And like I said, I didn't even know half of this stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is my teacher. Like, I was all of a sudden like, oh my, it kind of hit me at some point, like, wow, like, this isn't just somebody that is just teaching me one thing and from one thing. It's just like, whew. So, wanted to go over a little bit about your Olympic stuff and your, just kind of what you did competitively, and if that influenced you either way, in any way, to kind of pick a path or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So show jumping is where I started as a young child in Germany, and in England, then moved on to eventing. And I was really bad. I was not very good. The jumping part was always very natural for me. And so that part I was good at. But the dressage, I had this, I think, very common idea that dressage is a picture and it doesn't have anything to do with anything important. What was important was galloping across the countryside and jumping stuff.
Yeah.
And and even though I was so bad at the dressage, I was good enough in the jumping, and I had some really amazing horses that I was able to be selected to ride for the US and to train at the US 3-day headquarters for the team in South Hamilton, Massachusetts with Jack Legoff. And but I was still just so bad at dressage. And it wasn't until I moved to England and started training with Christopher Bartle that I started to really understand why dressage was so important. And I remember Jack Legoff telling my dad one time, the problem with Carol is that her horses can spell Czechoslovakia, but they can't even spell their own name. So it hit me, oh, that's what the basics are. My horses could do piaffe, passage, and flying changes every stride, pirouettes, and jump a house, but there wasn't a fluid flow between everything. So I could teach these things to my horses, but it was as if I was teaching them to sit up and beg or a trick, instead of the fact that they were free in their bodies. And so they could move freely, fluidly between one movement and another. Mm-hmm. So Christopher really opened my eyes to everything that Jack had been trying to teach me, everything that everybody before had been trying to teach me. And it was a light bulb. My riding definitely took a quantum leap. And then I became more interested in learning more about dressage. And so after that, I was a student at the Royal Andalusian School of Equestrian Art in Spain. And then while there, I knew a number of riders from the Portuguese School of Equestrian Art and studied with some of them. And so that's kind of the pathway. As soon as I realized how little I knew, even though I'd already represented my country, I quit competing because I just thought, I'm a fraud. I might be able to do this, but I didn't really know enough. And I hadn't taught at that point. I hadn't taught anything because I didn't think I knew enough to teach.
Yeah.
And when I came back to the States in 95 and wasn't really quite sure what I was going to do, I'd had to leave a horse behind in Germany because I couldn't afford to bring him home. And actually sold him to a member of the German 3-day team. And that broke my heart. It was just, so when I came home, I was really not sure I even wanted to continue. And then some people started asking me to teach them. And I thought, I don't know anything about teaching people. I can train horses, but I don't know anything about teaching people. So I thought, well, I'll sign up for a teacher course. So my first teacher course was with Henrik Johansson, who's a Danish writer, trainer of trainers in Denmark, very well known, comes to this area, has been coming here for years and years and years, and has become a great friend. And he, unknown to himself in a way, is very steeped in the French tradition as well, which is not the modern competitive dressage, crank and spank kind of way. And that's going to make a lot of people angry when I say that, crank and spank, because so many people ride that way and they don't think they are. They don't realize they are.
Yeah.
So I started learning a little bit more about teaching and just kind of went on from there. Now it is.
Okay. Awesome. So we're back with Carol, and we had to take a break there. We had some weather cutting in, and I thought of a question for her, and kind of to get to know her a little bit better and what she's about, and kind of in a more personal way instead of just, all the wonderful accomplishments you have. But what is your goal as a teacher or coach, mentor, trainer? And what do you feel is the most important thing that you offer or that you try to give to your students? And I'm going to say students because it could be anyone that rides or just listens or whatever. But what do you feel about those questions?
Yeah. So, first of all, I at this stage in my existence, I think of myself as a teacher. I'm not a coach anymore because I don't tell people what to do. That's not my goal. So I come from a lineage of education, if you will, that has been proven over hundreds of years and is constantly being reproven by modern scientific research. I didn't invent anything myself, a few exercises here and there, but that's it. But I find myself being part of an ever shrinking group of individuals that I think of as the last of the wisdom keepers. There's not many of us left. We're so old. But so my goal is to pass on this information to people who will learn it at a deep, deep level. I guess when it really comes
Wait,
down
hold on.
to it, I want students learning.
Wait, Carol, hold on.
Okay.
Let's pause it real quick. Okay, start where you left off at just a few seconds ago. The last of the wisdom keepers.
Okay. So my goal as the teacher is to pass this information on to people who want to learn it at a very deep level. I want students who are like me, people who just can't get enough learning, people who want to understand, who really want to understand. They don't just want to do something, really want to communicate with the horse and recognize that this is not just on a mental or intellectual level, but very deeply on a physical level. People who want to spend as much time with horses as they can, no matter what. And people who want a mentor, a teacher who is open-minded and humble enough to know that we're all still learning, especially me, someone who cares that they learn and doesn't just want to go through telling them what to do. But people who want to learn what to do. I think one of the best things that I do is to help teach people how to identify the source of the problems they're having.
Yeah.
And show them how to reach that source in order to, and I'm going to use a word I hate, to fix those problems. It's really comes down to guidance in the fundamental basics. I want to empower people to feel confident that they can train their own horse. They don't need someone else to tell them what to do, and they shouldn't wait around for someone else to tell them what to do. Once people have a deep understanding of the basic principles of a classic approach to training, and they understand a basic biomechanics and anatomy, which is what dressage is based in. And dressage, again, meaning training. But it's not just training the mind, it's not just training the body, it's training the many dimensions that horses are. And yeah, I want to empower people.
Well, that's awesome. That's definitely how I feel about you from the other side. I
Well,
definitely
good.
feel like in many ways I've been given permission to listen to my gut and to try different things and to try to match up, you know, my biomechanics and anatomy knowledge with, like, oh, maybe I just feel like if I just did this, you know, and then it's kind of like, well, now why did that work? And I didn't really have a lot of, I mean, when I met you, I was already teaching and stuff, but it was like, I don't know anything.
Well, you know, that's interesting that you say that, because most people out there teaching are trying to ride the horse through the student, you know, through the rider. So they're telling them to do this and to do that, and more this, more leg, more outside rein, whatever it is. But instead of asking the students questions about what they're feeling, can they feel changes happening when they do blah, blah, blah? This exercise creates blah, blah, blah in the horse. So go do it and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
You know, did it work? And so many people have never been guided in thinking along those lines, thinking about, did it do its job? Does the horse feel different? So many times I have people say to me, well, is it working? And I say, I don't know. You tell me. You're the one sitting up there.
Did it feel better? Did you feel
did
it?
it feel, yeah. Was it easier for the horse to do after you did blah, 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 you know? And so I'm not a person who's going to tell people what to do. I will definitely guide everybody in the process and the mechanics and the sequence of the use of the aids. This is important. But then I'm going to have people ask themselves questions about whether or not it feels better. You know, maybe this isn't the best exercise for this horse at this moment in time, but let's give it a rowdy go.
Right.
You know?
People, there are a lot of times I find, and not too much in, I think, my students, because I feel like I eclectically find these people that want something different, or they're really, really good horsemen and they're just looking for, I mean, who knows, maybe gaps. Or, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why anyone finds me. So, but a lot of times I feel like I ask them, did you feel that? And I feel like like there's this conditioning in some people, not everybody, but there's this conditioning that they'll just take my word for it if they did it right.
This is unfortunately the
And I'm like,
way of teaching today. Most people teach that, you know, so most students, and I certainly not all, but many students come into a lesson and they expect to be told to do certain things and what to do, instead of being asked to think critically about what they're feeling, what their horse is doing. And so often, you know this too, somebody has an idea in their head, my horse does this and it means that. And so often I find myself saying, actually, it doesn't mean that. You know, how many times, how many times have you heard somebody say, he knows what I want him to do, he just won't do it? Horses aren't like that. They don't sit there and go, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I know what you want, I'm not going to do it. That's just not in their nature. So something's missing, or something's in the way of them doing that. We talked about this yesterday or the other day, that very often it's their balance, it's a lack of straightness, it's something is impeding their ability physically to execute what you ask them to do. And that's our job, to guide the student through different exercises that might help them find that gap or that blockage. And this is important for all of us to keep remembering too. And this is what you've been talking about, but not one of them ever signed up for this.
Yeah.
No horse in history ever knocked on somebody's door and said, "Hey, you want to come out and sit on my back?" You know,
Let me
it never
carry you
happened.
around all day.
Yeah, no, it's all for us. Everything we get from them,
Yeah,
is for us.
and that, like you were saying about yourself, that the wisdom keepers, it's I think you get wise by making lots of mistakes.
Oh yeah, I've
And
made
learning
every
from
single
them.
one you
I
could.
think there's
Yeah.
a saying somewhere there, so I should be very wise in a short amount of time. But I've appreciated your approach, because I feel like you truly, no matter what, remember the horse. And I think that it's almost like you help people blaze this path that helps them to avoid these pitfalls to begin with. Because every time I get frustrated, I'm running out of tools. That's why I say I run out of tools to solve this problem. You kind of just have this calm, like this cool water, this cool breeze, like, oh, just think about this. And I'm like, I walk away going like, oh my gosh, like how many lessons can I have with my broken horse that we're repeating the same thing, and I'm learning something completely new that's applicable to like 40 different scenarios. So
well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, that's good feedback. So okay, because I have a feeling we're gonna go off on a segue pretty soon. So let's stop this video where we're at and resume with a new topic.
Okay.